Hong Kong, Beijing has faced a groundswell of criticism from mostly Western nations over its decision to impose a new law that forbids acts of subversion, secession, terrorism and colluding with foreign forces. Yesterday, 380 arrests took place. Things are much quieter on the ground today, but diplomatically tensions continue to grow. We're joined now for more on that by our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Let's go right to the international condemnation, notable blowback from the US and the UK.
Absolutely, but also notable are the countries where we haven't had blowback from. Here we are in the heart of the European Union. There has been notable silence because the policy in general, sweeping brushstrokes, has been business first China. They just do not want to risk the relationship with China, at least not yet a reaction. But like you said, US, UK, also let's add Canada to that list, and Australia. Those four countries have actually gotten together, wrote a joint sort of communique, a statement denouncing this new security law, which basically would rescind, in the view of its critics, a lot of those civil liberties that were supposed to be guaranteed.
Because on paper it sounds great, against terrorism, against all of this stuff.
It's supposed to safeguard China's national security, but it also at the same time, and we're already seeing signs of that, rescinding the basic civil liberties and freedom of expression of a lot of people on Hong Kong, at least that being the fear here. What's Britain doing? Well, Britain is basically offering and proposing to offer settlement to up to 3 million. There are 3 million Hong Kongers who have this status called BNO, British National Overseas Citizens, which means that they could technically come to Britain, settle there, and then down the road be eligible for nationality, British nationality. China blowing back on that one, basically saying you do that and there will be very severe retaliation. And Britain saying, well, we can't basically coerce and force China not to block Hong Kongers from coming to Britain. U.S., meanwhile, both houses of Congress are almost totally together on a bill that would, sort of offer refugee status, very similar to what the UK is doing to Hong Kongers who want to flee the island because they're scared of the security law, and also impose sanctions on individuals, businesses, and other entities that would undermine Hong Kong's freedoms and basically be complicit with Beijing in cracking down on citizens there. So very interesting what we're seeing.
So you mentioned China being pretty unrattled by the UK offer to settle citizens. What of the rest of their reaction? What are we hearing out of Beijing regarding this condemnation?
There is a clear calculation here by Xi Jinping, the paramount leader, the president of China, that whatever the blowback, whatever the condemnation is going to be from the international community, as we call it, which is actually a lot smaller. It's not dozens of countries. It's right now a handful of countries condemning this law. But whatever the blowback, it is far lesser, the consequences of that, than how China sees it, the perceived threat from these continued protests, this groundswell of revolt from Hong Kong that it sees as perhaps jeopardizing, being a real thorn in its side. So it is willing to go out and do what it takes to quell these protests. So
we're seeing continuity essentially from Beijing. It's just a slow, steady, well, not necessarily steady, but a pretty coherent line.
A coherent line. Xi Jinping's policy, if anything, has been consistent. It is the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation, and he sees this as part of a long-term game plan, not a short-term one. So he's willing to sit back and take whatever, as he sees it, little quibbling from the West about their petty little human rights issues in order to have his long-term goal of making sure that China is the paramount force over what it rightfully sees as its territory, Hong Kong, even if that means a law that essentially quells the civil liberties.
And sapping all the time, well, at least hoping to sap the will of the people on the streets of Hong Kong.
Exactly. I'll just say one thing there. You know, one person referred to this as a bloodless version of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, in the sense that the goal of this law, and it's proving effective in the early days, is to frighten and to intimidate, not to totally suppress. You might not have to have mass arrests all the time. We're already seeing this cast a pall over the ways in which Hong Kong residents are reacting. We've seen stories, local stories in the media there, about financial business people who are already scared, or not scared, but very reluctant to talk openly about the security law, at least not in their formal communications, because now, as one of them said, the walls have ears now. They are scared of surveillance and just a much more oppressive climate and atmosphere. Hong Kong, becoming a lot more like Beijing in at least the climate going forward.
All right, Douglas Herbert, thanks for that analysis. Now to Myanmar next, where a massive landslide